Hello and welcome to a new episode of The Better Meta. My guests today are Ben Sherman, a vendor for the game, who you may have seen selling and trading at events like UK Nats, and Simon He, who is a Worlds Race competitor who has a proven track record at major events. Ben holds the position of having won the UK National Championship, and Simon has shown off his ability with masses of national and international tops. Today we are talking about ban lists in YuGiOh. So obviously it's quite a key point for any competitive season, what is on the ban list and what kind of impact it's going to have. But for the sort of less experienced viewers out there, Simon, why don't you tell us briefly about the YuGiOh ban list in general and what exactly is it?
The ban list is when certain YuGiOh cards are banned, like just completely unable to be played, or restricted to one, or semi-restricted, so you can only play 2 copies in the deck, or cards get changed so that you can play 3 copies. Usually a few cards, let's say like 2 or 3 gets put to the ban forbidden section, 1 or 2 gets put to the limited, etc.
Okay, yep, sure. And this is to address problems in the game, shall we say? Or also to help with product sales as well, right?
More to do with problems, I think. I'm not sure if it helps product sales. I think they just do it in a way it doesn't harm product sales.
Okay, yeah. So the ban list system in of itself isn't the only option out there. There are some other alternatives. So there are cases like set rotations, where new releases come in and older releases stop being playable for the purpose of competitive tournaments. Ben, do you know any other cases of alternatives to ban lists?
It's like you say, a lot of games have rotations where they'll take sets out usually on a yearly basis. So you usually get about 4 sets and then like a main core set each year. This is easier for the game to produce because you can reprint a lot of the same cards. They don't have to come up with as many concepts. Whereas in Yu-Gi-Oh, every core set is 100 completely different cards to every other core set. Now back to your original question. So think of any other games that have anything different than a set ban list or a rotation. I'm not really too sure. There's some that have like sort of a middle ground where they do rotations and then certain cards become too powerful within a rotation, so they have to outright ban it.
Yeah. Right. So Ben, this is quite interesting because Ben and I have actually discussed this before with a few other people, and I actually thought rotation would be very, very good, especially towards the let's say late last year and early this year, late 2018 and early 2019 period, because it was just such a degenerate format with FTKs and ridiculous combo decks that you don't really get a turn to play with, which is, it's not that funny when you don't get a turn. There's just more variance when there's less turns. There's less turns for people to make a mistake or for players to make a good move, so there's just more variance. And we were discussing that the game has gotten into such a ridiculous state that it was very difficult for them to correct, because there's so many cards now, and there's so many these mechanics linking pendulum and everything, that they always have to release like a new master rule every now and then to solve that. But I think eventually they're going to have to rotate out certain mechanics, or say everything before this year is now banned. But then they'll obviously release a few of the staple cards like Mirror Force, etc. in like reprints, and say they're still legal. So there's 2 reasons I think this might happen, because they can't. It's kind of like the same as Pokemon. They cannot just keep on releasing new mechanics like Mega Evolutions and what was it, Z-moves. Like they're very similar.
Yeah,
they're very similar to what we have in the extra deck, where they release synchros and then XYZs and then pendulums and now links. So they cannot forever just keep releasing things to go in the extra deck. Something has to change.
But how do they account for the sorry to interrupt, but how do they account for the the shock to the player base when, if in the future they do switch to a more rotational based system?
I don't have a good solution to that. The second thing I would what I was going to say is there was actually like a promotion and it had a small thing involving the TCG, and it said Yu-Gi-Oh! Reset 20. So there were
21.
rumors. It said the logo it was some sort of presentation, some sort of marketing, and it said Yu-Gi-Oh! Reset 2020.
Wow. Okay.
So there were rumors that in 2020, like the Master Rule or whatever it is, they're gonna cycle out certain things, or just like do rotation of certain things.
Well, that would certainly shake things up.
So they give you a few months to prepare for it. I guess the best time to do it would be after Worlds. So you have a couple of months to prepare for it. They announce it at Worlds, and then you can get, like, everyone's gonna complain. Anything that Konami does, everyone's gonna complain regardless. So it doesn't really matter too much.
We don't like change as a player base.
I think it's necessary, and I think they know it's necessary, because when I found out about Speed Duel, that was their way of saying the game has gotten too complicated. That new players adapt, like new kids that come into the game, there's no way they can come into the competitive scene, and they will probably get deterred because who wants to go to the first tournament and then get F without even playing. I think there was a match, the first feature match in YCS London. Like, this child that just got FTK'd by a pro, and that child literally
played the Jesse Cotton one.
Yeah, he resolved one card the entire match.
Yeah,
and Speed Duel is just like that gateway of YuGiOh for like kids to sort of go into it first and then go into competitive, so they're not like completely just frightened from the game.
Yeah. But they've done a pretty decent job with it. There is some transition between the Speed Duel player base and the proper TCG player base. There is movement there. So there's some evidence that it's actually working.
I'm not too knowledgeable about that because I haven't paid attention to Speed Duel, and I've heard rumors that Speed Duel isn't doing so well, and Konami Japan isn't so pleased with that. And the people I know that play Speed Duel, they're literally there just because the giant card is worth quite a bit on the secondary market.
Yeah.
So they see it as an easy way to just make a couple thousand kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, let's try not to get too distracted on the Speed Duel place. I mean, obviously it does have its own ban list, but it's a bit different.
Oh, I did not know that.
I'm pretty sure it has a ban list. Does it not?
I do not know. Maybe
I'm
they're
pretty
gonna
sure
have
it
the
does.
YCS soon.
I didn't think Speed Duel was that popular, to be honest. I've not seen too many people playing. Yeah, it seems like what they were aiming for was to get people hooked on Duel Links, because it's very accessible, it's very easy, you can play it while you're sat on your sofa or whatever, and then to try and transition people into Speed Duel from there. But it didn't seem to work.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to justify the movement there, because you've got more stuff when you're playing Speed Duel, and it's more accessible than engaging with the tabletop variant.
You can't transfer your digital cards that they bought into physical ones.
Yeah. It'd be nice if you could go the other way. But, back to ban lists then. I did want to briefly touch upon the sort of impact that an immediate release has. So, depending on what time of year it is, a ban list itself will have a different impact. Simon, maybe you can comment on what are some of the sort of immediate impacts that happen shortly after a ban list comes out. What are the typical trends that we see amongst competitive players?
Oh, we just have like people making ridiculous claims. Like there's usually a go-to claim that everyone makes. Like there's a very obvious one, and for example, like last year like a lot of people that just hung on to Sky Striker for correct reasons actually, because it just never got hit until way later in the season. They usually stick to what they know, so you'll see a lot more like alter guys than true Draco at first at local events. And then like the more heads up players, the more better players, they'll work out like that perception, that first initial perception, or they'll use that perception from people and use it against them and go like a different.
I think, would you say that we saw that last year at YCS London with the and Niagara as well, the presence of the danger decks, when so many people turned to the more control-based decks?
I mean, it doesn't usually just slow down. I mean, it can, like for example, in YCS Milan, there was the Rongo deck that was just basically a pseudo edge. It completely depends on what they ban and what they bring back.
Yeah, true. The sort of the ban list that we experience throughout the year, I think we discussed this previously. They tend to change in severity, right?
Yeah. It's usually just after Worlds that we get a much bigger list that changes a lot more. That's when sort of big heavy hitters get banned, unless there's of course a problem in the meta, like a serious problem, like Summon Sorceress, for example, or Firewall when they were removed.
Yeah, that does make sense to do like a big list afterwards, because like, that season, that year of products that they're trying to sell, they probably maxed out on selling those products anyway, and they want to make way for the new season of products or whatever archetype they're trying to do.
Yeah. But then it does mean you have the quite sort of more gentle, should we say, ban lists during the season that are just problem corrections, and they don't tend to entirely take out meta decks from any of the competitive season.
I don't think they haven't done anything to try to take out meta decks completely at all. Like they've sort of like nudged Sky Striker, and they've sort of nudged Salamangreat. They're still both one decks. They've sort of hit combo decks harder because they're the problems, but they haven't hit the engine that goes around, and usually it's the danger engine. Like they've sort of touched it a little bit, but it's still very viable in most of the.
I was going to say, the reason I don't think it feels like the hits have been that severe is because usually when things have been hit in a similar manner, the next set would be released and then the cards would also get power crept at the same time. That's probably why it felt like the hits were a bit stronger. Whereas now there's been no new releases of a meta deck, really, or any deck that can compete with what we've got with Sky Striker, Orca, Salamangreat.
Yeah.
It feels like there's no combination, it's just a ban list on its own trying to tackle this problem.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, that is a good point.
And so what you see...
Yeah, there hasn't been an archetype this season that is like a complete new archetype. Like, for example, from September, where we are now, last year, we got Thunder Dragons, we
got Marincess.
You know what? I still haven't fully learned what they do. I'm pretty sure I'll face them at a regional, and they can sort of just combo off, and I just have no idea.
It's a King of the Castle deck. You don't need to worry about it.
Yeah, I think it is fair to say that we haven't had an extremely powerful, like proper meta deck released in a while. But what I was thinking was, a few years ago we had Necros in the format. And after they performed extremely well, they were very severely hit. And it was an engine hit in order to allow other decks that were less consistent or potentially less powerful to actually formulate a position in the meta, and decks like Maransis, although they don't have an enormous ceiling and they're not, I mean they're still pretty consistent and it's very good in terms of like hand advantage, but that's just not something that will dominate when there are all these other decks.
If your deck gets hurt like really badly by hand trap, it needs to be basically a full-on combo deck with a really high ceiling to compensate for that.
Yeah. But then if there is no combo deck to compete with, for whatever reason, ban list, etc.,
No.
do you not think it's worth it? You think it would just move to a control format?
Oh no. Love control formats. Control formats are the best. Like I said before, like
True.
if you have more turns, if you have more interactions, then there are more opportunities for your opponent to make a mistake or to make a really good play, which means it's more skillful the more turns. And you usually find with the control based formats, like the general people that the really good people, they tend to top a little bit.
Sorry, did you say a little bit more?
Yes, a little bit more.
Yeah. That's fair enough. Returning to our topic as a central focus, one thing that comes up quite a lot when I discuss ban lists with people at events is the fact that there's basically no player interaction with how they're formulated. It's all results and Konami driven. What do you guys think about whether players should have any say on what actually features on the ban list?
I think there should definitely be some form of interaction. However, there is a small argument to say tournament results are the players' interaction with the ban. It'd be nice to see like a poll. It'd be really awkward for them to do it, but like a Facebook poll, or maybe have a booth at some events where they could get some ideas. However, they also don't want to give any information away about things that might get banned or might come off, because that can interrupt the secondary market. And as much as they might not want to admit it, a healthy game needs a strong secondary market to stay healthy. Look at all the top games, Pokemon, Magic, YuGiOh, they've all got very strong.
That is completely your department.
Yeah. They've all got very strong secondary markets, and that's why the games always thrive.
Yeah.
I can't speak for the secondary market, but I think the poll idea is just not good. It seems very democratical, and I think a lot of people would want that. And it might be quite the unpopular opinion, but I think most people have no idea what they're talking about. So they see a deck that's being played a lot, which is actually very skillful, but they don't like it because they keep losing. And they're going to be like, oh, do this, do this, do this. But most of the time, it's not really that much of a problem. And I think what you said about asking people for opinion, they do actually. Like the people that were in charge of creating some of the TCG exclusive cards and had input to the ban list have asked me in the past, and a few other players, like, what if X came back, or should X be banned? Like they kept it. They asked a few fake questions. They kept it in a way that, because they've asked a few questions.
Imagine what a powerful impact it would be if that were a public exchange. If they put up an article on their webpage that said, we discussed with, like, they don't have to name you, but several pro players or several players.
No, because then that puts the blast on. Like, can you imagine? They shift the blame. So like basically Konami gets the blame for every decision that they make, be good or bad. Usually, even if they make a good decision, but there's people that think it's a bad decision and blast them anyway. But if they write in an article, we spoke to X pro player about.
No, but if they don't name them, if they
right,
we spoke to 20 pro players from so and so regions, and from our discussions we determined that these are the optimal cards to limit, ban, etc.
Yeah,
We just need some evidence that this
I,
interaction is
they,
happening
they
because
they do
there's a
it.
wall.
Like they definitely. Yeah, I understand that the communication is not very transparent. I've sort of like that is a whole different topic that I can complain about. Um, like I,
Well, it's good to know that this is happening,
we
right?
don't have enough time for that, but like yeah, it definitely does
We can do
happen.
another one.
But they can't all take on the opinion of the players, and also they don't. I feel like they don't necessarily need it because they the people that create the game, the cards, they know the situation quite well. They actually
Yeah.
test different interactions and combo decks and decks in general against they know very well what the problem is and what to do.
Yeah, they've got
But
people that
what
are
we
actually being paid to do it.
yes, and what we can't do them is the other part that matters to them, like how they, for example, they're releasing more products, more support that we don't know about, and then obviously they can't hit those cards, hit that archetype too hard.
Yeah. It does. It's interesting because it does generate a fair amount of speculation, but yeah, I think that's a fair enough argument on that point. One more main question from me then. Obviously, banlists can have a very strong impact on the game, and we don't always know exactly when they're going to be released. We at the moment we have a fairly rough idea of when they're coming out, but it does mean that there is some time or like time window in which players can prepare for different ban lists. So what kind of things do you guys do in order to prepare for different ones?
I'll let Simon start with this one, and then I'll because I'm
Yeah,
probably going to take a different route.
you completely different route because you might be selling and buying stuff, and I'm just sitting there like, just please release it 3 weeks before an event, please, not like 1 week before an event, not like 2 weeks before an event. There's no preparation. Like you said, we sort of know when it's released, but we don't know exactly. They've set a date of no earlier than X date, but it never is on that date, so it's always quite a bit later on that date. I just take it as it comes.
Yep. Yeah, I think when you're attempting to compete, it's certainly something you kind of have to just accept in certain scenarios.
Yeah, there's not much to prepare for. There's not much we can. As a player, there's not much to do.
But Ben, you're on the vending side, so
yeah.
how does that differ for you?
So you can never really, like, you can sometimes prepare for a ban list, but usually you never really can. You've just got to be very quick to react. I'm in various sort of social circles where if a ban list happens, I hear about it very, very quickly. So I'm usually able to react very fastly. So maybe taking certain listings down of cards that are going to go up. Recently, sort of with the needle fiber announcement, some things went up. So that's another example of that. And then the buying of certain cards that might come back off the ban list, and then you've also just got to prepare. Like a very good thing to think about is if you it's actually an advocate for getting high rarity cards. If you get a card that is high rarity, even if that card gets hit, it'll retain more value in the long run than the lower rarity versions of a card. So I'm trying to think of a low rarity card that had let's see. That's quite difficult actually. Or if it comes in and out of the meta. So for example, Forbidden Challenge, if you have ultimate rare copies, they're always going to retain some form of value when it comes into the meta. And even when it comes out of the meta as well, where if you have commons, then they might go up to like 2 or 3 while it's good, and then it'll go back down to 50p while it's bad. And it can sway quite a lot, whereas high rarity will always retain value. So you've just got to prepare it that way as well.
And what about, so this one's quite interesting for me. Max C does some interesting things around ban list time.
Oh, Maxi is the greatest. It always sells out at ban list times. A lot of band things do, but usually Maxi is the main one. What else is banned? Harpy's Feather Dusters also are another main one. It's mainly stuff that is back in Japan that people expect will come back over here. Even though it is different formats, completely different. Well, I wouldn't say completely different ban list, but the game is very different. And then usually, right after the ban list drops, you'll see the prices slowly start to creep back as people keep undercutting each other and that sort of. So it is a very fun thing to see.
Get to play around with the markets a little bit there.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks very much both of you for coming on and discussing ban lists today.
You're welcome. Yeah, no problem.
And remember guys, if you're watching, if you have any comments or suggestions that you'd like to make, you can put those in the comments section. We'll take a look and get back to you as soon as we can. Thanks for watching this episode of the Better Meta, and we'll see you guys in the next one.